generation Mexican American being told that if they don't like the US right now, they should just go home and leave the country because you do not fit our cultural identity, because you are not white, because you don't fit the specific mold that is currently predominant within society. What we're saying on our side of the house is that this kind of policy is incentivizing this kind of rhetoric. When we look at how Donald Trump is currently talking about how people are taking over our country, even though those supposed people are actually American citizens, how these are people from the Black Caucus, how these are people, how these are Latinas, how these are basically people from all over the world who are contributing citizens, who are working towards helping their society, making their society better. And yes, these people do face a lot of barriers. Yes, they in some cases do live shit lives. But what we're standing for on opposition side is that we should push towards a society to actually reform these kind of rhetoric and not entrench it. Not give governments as well as politicians, and especially if we look across the political spectrum in both the US and in Europe, we see this kind of extremely right-wing rhetoric. We see this increasing and increasing. So we say that we need to be able to counter this. This is a kind of policy that only works this kind of rhetoric into hand. We also think that specifically countries like France are much more likely to bring this kind of policy in, thereby again saying that what France really is a white society in which where people should never be allowed to wear a burkini because that harms what it is to be truly French. We contest that kind of narrative, and that is why we think this motion is incredibly harmful. So what am I going to talk about in my speech? First of all, I'm going to talk about, no, please sit down. First, I'm going to talk about who's actually likely to take up on this offer, how this hampers societal change, and thirdly, how does this impact minority staying. But first, some rebuttal. First of all, we get this idea, we hear that this model was a need-based thing. We probably agree to some extent. However, the person who's likely to take up on an offer is probably someone like me. Not that I have a wealth of money, but I am a person who is able to move their lives quite easily. I am a person who still has a high education, but also I speak English, I also now speak German. I am a person that I can actually move. A lot of people in society that you guys are talking about and that you want to give the opportunity in terms of moving are very unlikely to actually take up on the offer. However, they receive all the kind of stigmatization that you guys are talking about when you say, yes, sometimes liberal countries are just really shit. What we're saying is that outside this, we think there are a lot more other reasons why people would want to stay. For example, because you have family ties. For example, because you have a job there, you've been successful, you want to improve more. However, what we're saying is that what happens under their side of the house is that there is, again, a pressure on people who currently do not have these kind of opportunities, who currently do not have these kind of jobs, that it is their fault in the first place because if they don't like the country right now, they should just leave. Also, they work under an assumption that it's probably going to be nice, a pretty nice life in a new country that they live in. They say that the comparative here is no option versus a slightly, no option in living in your shit country and not being able to leave versus a slightly better option. We contest this kind of definition because what we're bringing in the next argument I will be bringing is about how this hampers societal change. We think that the no option is not true. People can have an option to improve their society. Most of the time this works via rights-based areas, via government policies that promote minorities being in the workplace, versus all the kind of nice things that ultimately do give people opportunities to do so. At the point that you have a government openly supporting a rhetoric that is against people staying in that country, that if they want to be really French, for starters, should never wear a burkini again, it means that these are the kind of people that you're not helping. But, Monica.
Not only did we show that there are alternatives in normal liberal society of dealing with racism, like going to court or the same majority, but even in the most severe and rare case of a country filled with only racists saying, at least the victims won't be there to suffer from them.
That's not true. The victims will be there and they will be suffering, and they don't have necessarily the will, like they might not actually want to leave because you have these family ties, because you have an area that you care about. How are you telling Mexican Americans who have lived already in the US for 3 generations, who do have who see this as their country, that, well, if you really want to improve your life, you should just leave? We think that kind of narrative is incredibly damaging, and is also hampering any kind of political will to actually further it. Because what we see is that already movements in the Netherlands, for example, that try to further rights of people, and especially when we look, for example, in the UK right now after Brexit, we see a lot of hate crime, for example, against minorities. We see that people now you see we voted to keep the UK like it should be, to give a narrative, and OG agrees with us. They agree with us that this is far more likely that people will that the state will become much more nationalistic, and that the state is going to be a much more homogenous pool of people. We think that ultimately this is going to lead to a kind of country that is very much more nationalistic and dominant in the specific way that the country has always been, that the country or historically has been, and is even going to further silence minority views and minority dissent that there already is. Any kind of political society or group trying to further Mexican rights is going, or further more opportunities for for coming family reunification, is going to be met with the idea: if you want to live with your whole family together, then maybe you should just move to the other side. We think that the whole explanation that they give on how this is stopping grading is probably not true. A person that is easiest able to move around the world is probably someone like me. And I ultimately don't think that I should specifically benefit from these kind of policies, because ultimately I can probably make it on my own. So ultimately, this creates a society that only helps people like me, who probably don't need it, and has a lot of really negative side effects.